Followers of the Transformers franchise are probably already familiar with the fun-loving communications Autobot known as Blaster. The spirited boombox transforming robot is often portrayed as a counterpart to the iconic Decepticon Soundwave, thus having his own fan following and is often a character that collectors look for when building their various toy collections. That being said, the foundation of Blaster's beginnings occurs a little before his mass release in 1985, which is the year he appeared both in the second season of the cartoon as well as the second year of the Transformers Generation 1 toy line. To understand this, we'll need to go back in time to see how a functioning AM radio toy developed into a more lively character that fans have become familiar with. So stay tuned, because we're going to discuss the origin of the toy that would eventually become known as the Autobot Blaster. Let's begin. As we retrace the steps of toy history, let's start by saying that the Transformers began as an amalgamation of two toy lines originally belonging to the Japanese company known as Takara. The 1984 cars and jets would be sourced from Takara's Diaclone toy line, namely the existing Diaclone car robot subline and the F-15 jet robo, respectively. The other everyday transforming household items were sourced from Takara's Microman toy line, specifically from Microman's own subline that was called Microchange. Some of the 1983 Microchange lineup of toys made it into the Transformers 1984 lineup, such as the molds used for Megatron, Soundwave, and others. And some of the 1984 Microchange toys would end up in the Transformers 1985 lineup, like what was done for the microscope that became Perceptor and the designated MC-21 that became the Autobot Boombox Blaster. Microchange had been using an MC letter designation for each of their toys. So for example, the Gun Robo Walther P-38 that became Megatron was originally designated as the MC-12. And the MC-21 is called the Radi-Casse or Radi-Casse depending on your choice of pronunciation, which presumably is short for Radio Cassette. All this of course occurred during a later time during Microman's original vintage toy run, because the line had actually existed previously as far back as 1974, with the toys being a group of micro, cyborg-like beings that came to Earth as literal, small-scaled Micromen. So the 3 3/4 inch tall figures that were being sold were actually meant to be 1-to-1 size in scale. All of this was prior to the introduction of the transformable 1983 Microchange toys that would help the Microman beings in their fight against their enemies. Getting back to the MC-21 radio cassette, you'll see the obvious cosmetic differences between this toy and the more famous Blaster character. As can be seen, the toy has a primarily blue color scheme which differentiates it from the red of the G1 character. That said, it's worth pointing out that the MC-21 figure also came in a red variant during its Microchange era, closer to G1 Blaster, albeit you can see that the tape door is still a different color from Blaster. The gun from the Microchange figure looks pretty much identical to the G1 version, but you'll notice that it also comes with an earphone set and a non-transformable cassette, which is part of the uniqueness of this version. The cassette was part of what made the AM radio function work, because you'll notice when you open the tape door on the toy, it has a pin or a speaker plug of sorts that the cassette had a port for which to plug into, and this port is not included in your regular transforming cassettes. Thus, you actually can't put your regular G1 style cassettes into this Microchange tape deck, nor can you put the other Microchange transforming cassettes into this tape deck. You could, however, plug the earpiece into the cassette port. There's several other functionality differences between the Microchange toy and G1 Blaster that we should note. See here that the on and off switch for Blaster is just molded in, but it's actually a functional switch that you can flip left and right on the Microchange version. Also note that there's no volume knob on the left side of the G1 Blaster, but you do have the adjustable volume knob on the Microchange one, and there was also an adjustable knob on the cassette itself. The knob to tune between stations is also just molded in on G1 Blaster, but on the original you can see that it's a functioning knob. Further, there's no opening compartment on the back of G1 Blaster, but there was an opening compartment on the Microchange one, so you could store the cassettes inside since the front tape door was only meant for the non-transformable cassette as mentioned earlier. The original battery cover on one leg has been taken out from the G1 1985 blaster, but you could put a pair of batteries on the original 1984 MC21, which was actually meant to amplify the signal when you used the cassette inside the tape deck chest. The earphone plug was also non-existent on G1 Blaster, but you could clearly plug the earpiece into the original. Again, more functionality. The cassette itself had an on-off switch of its own, and note that you also needed a smaller battery to put into the cassette so that you could use the radio function. And I didn't have this battery, so I was unable to test mine, but my buddy Vincent was able to test his as he has the same toy and was able to source a battery. So check it out. The idea here though was just to highlight the differences, and you can see that there are many, despite the similar outward appearance in the tooling between these two toys. Also take note that the small battery cover for the cassette is easily losable, so it's best just to keep it on the cassette itself. Overall, the idea here back in the day was to listen to the radio directly through the microcassette and the earpiece, or to put the cassette into the tape deck and use the various dials to play it from the main toy itself and use the batteries in the figure leg to amplify the signal. Now that we've discussed functionality, further looking at cosmetics, you'll see the MC21 cassette is thicker than that of the transformable cassettes. The front of the tape door also shows the MC21 designation, the Takara company text, and the radio cassette name on the top left, whereas the G1 Blaster tape door really just has the Autobot faction symbol. The box also shows that the earpiece can wrap around the gun and tab into the center opening, as well as the opening in the stock on the back, which probably explains why the G1 Blaster had these openings in the first place. The physical transformation between both toys is identical though, so they did manage to keep that intact despite all the other physical differences. It is interesting that among the Microman figures that got reused for the Transformers line, many were just straight color changes or had some minor tooling differences, but this MC21 goes a step beyond that in terms of its overall function. Also, a blue version of Blaster was actually released for the G1 Transformers line, particularly for 1987's Japanese Headmasters series. This blue version was known as Twincast and was a rebuilt version of Blaster after he and Soundwave had fought to the death early on during the events of the Japanese Headmasters cartoon series. The 1987 release was only sold in Japan, though it was reissued later on in 2006 as an eHobby exclusive and again in 2012. In general, it's always fascinating to go back and have a look at the toys that existed before the more well-known versions of the ones that many of us grew up with. Yes, while Blaster and later Twincast popularized the use of this form-changing boombox throughout the decades, fans have grown to appreciate the initial backstories that paved the way for the Generation 1 Transformers toy line to exist in the first place. Thus, hopefully showing the evolution of this toy and character can help add to the knowledge base for Transformers fans who are curious to seek out this sort of information. So do me a favor and share this video, as well as subscribe to the channel and turn your notifications on so you don't miss future knowledge sharing sessions like this one. And if you happen to like this video, don't go anywhere just yet. I'm gonna put another Transformers origin topic that you can click on right over here, or for a look at a completely different toy history topic, you can click on this video right over here. Otherwise, let's transform and roll out into the next video. Thanks for watching, and take care.